Wow, I tell you what a pain in the butt here. We're gonna continue this if I don't know if this is gonna be too loud or not. I just got to listen to a few tunes. I don't know if it's gonna come over the the microphone or not. This retopology part is a pain in the butt. This is a continuation of the body series. I think that 2.8 is pretty much good enough to use for this type of stuff now. Using native tools, just moving some things around, it actually gives me a little bit greater flexibility than what 3Difficullt did, because there are some certain tools that Blender has that 3Difficullt doesn't have that allows me to move some of the stuff around a little bit easier and copy things to different areas and so on and so forth. Um, but I started using this um, type of method a while ago when I tried to condense everything into one specific application that I could use for almost everything. So this is the longissimus thoracis muscle. It's a long band of muscles. I think it looks like it's made up of multiple heads that actually connect to. These would be connecting to ribs and quite possibly the spinal column. I don't have any other reference around it. It looks very simple from this end, but then when you look at all the connections that it makes and it forms this one long muscle, it's a nightmare retopology practice. So what I decided to do, and I don't know if I'm just going to make this as a tip. I don't know if I'm going to show you very much of this at all, but basically what I decided to do is take all these insertions, or into the related bones here, and then just try to cap it off and then start building networks around. And it's pretty easy to kind of just grab something that you've already made. I wanted to go ahead and use 8 sides to uh, do this, so that I could have like an even number on each one of them, because usually what I find out is with complex networks like this, if I'm not making the end pieces first, like I'm doing here, then I'm usually running into situations where I have anywhere between 4 to 8 um, divisions around the side here, 8 sides, and usually the subdivision surfaces work a little bit better with 8, because you're really just making a curve and it's figuring out where to draw that curve around. At least 3 points gives it a good place to translate that through. But if I end up having to build off of the large simple surface, which is this, and then try to network all that stuff later, I end up having really odd sides and things like that. So what I'm going to try to do is continue to look at this from a different point of view, and like I said, starting with the end pieces first and then networking them all together. And so all it is just basically taking this same shape and then refitting it to everything around here. Um, to kind of approximate it, I'll never get to the point where I have enough resolution around here and keep it simple. But if I can keep it close to the shape, then when I start making the normal maps, then it will look very, very close to this high resolution um, model underneath. This high resolution is basically a OBG file that was taken from a CT scan and then surface modeled. And then I try to reduce it just a little bit more than what their reduction level was, and then gave me something to work with. Um, but it's kind of a mess. If we switch out and we look at this one, you can see how many polygons there are in this whole high resolution, and they're going all over the place. Not all of them are quads, and you can see how much of a nightmare this would be to UV unwrap. It's still going to be a nightmare to UV unwrap. Uh, but to simplify this even further is the goal, so that I can unwrap this thing, make it a a very good approximation, and then reduce it's like several thousand. It's over 143,000 polygons, and hopefully I can get that down to just a few thousand polygons to deal with, because these things are way too heavy and way too messy to deal with. I think I'll, oops, I think I'll try this. Using Blender 2.8, the last build, since I've been compiling my own, but this was the last build that I got from, I think it was February 3rd. And I've been finding some bugs in here, or some display errors that I don't like too much, so I've been kind of reporting those. But overall 2.8 is pretty stable. Been doing pretty good for me recently. It doesn't really crash all that much, so I figured I can move this project over to Blender 2.8 because it allows me to be just a little bit more productive overall. And then for all the other people that have used Blender, yes, I am using the left click select. Do I like it? Yeah, I think it kind of makes things a little bit more easy to manage, but I kind of grew up on Blender using the right click select for everything. And I noticed that my finger gets a little bit more tired this way than if I'm switching back and forth between the right and left click. I don't like how that came out over there. Yeah, I guess I'll deal with it later. But this is all I've been doing, is just taking little patches. I started out with a simple plane, subdivided it so that I could have 8 vertices around there and give me 8 sides to mess with. And then I've just been copying that over and over again to different areas. And then, like I said, approximating the shape as best I can so that I can start bridging things and networking them together. So let's try to get this here. If anyone's wondering, also on the technical side of things, what I'm basically running on Linux Mint 19.1. It's been pretty solid for me. It hasn't really crashed too much. Kernel updates have been okay. There have been some hangs with the Cinnamon desktop once in a while. Not really sure if that's a hardware issue, a kernel issue, or operating system issue. Usually it's not the operating system off the bat. It might be like a kernel issue where it doesn't fully support, the current kernel that I'm using doesn't fully support the AMD processor that I have. But it should, because I'm running kernel 4.15 dot whatever. And I think they started supporting the Ryzen processors on 4.10, so, but it does a really decent job. I'm going to save these indentations because these are little places where they insert, and it looks like maybe a rib that passes through there, maybe through there, and then I'm not sure where this inserts, but I'm going to leave those indents somewhere somewhat alone for right now, and then it'll come together with a networking thing. I just have to find a way that I'm going to come down through here. As you see, there are some difficulties with these little undercuts and stuff, and those are usually like a pain in the ass, and what I end up doing is I just overlap it. Sometimes what this is a artifact resulting from building that surface, so it very well could go here, but there could be a piece of anatomy that actually goes through there on this particular individual. It's not all that important to get that, because technically this is the side that is obviously in your back, on the back side, and this is facing the ribs towards the front, so this is usually going to be hidden in a render. But my goal was to try to get this to be close to being, I guess, anatomically correct, so that if I needed to isolate these certain muscles for some reason, that I could do it and it would look at least decent. Other than that, you're more than welcome to go ahead and just sculpt everything, because it's probably going to be hidden up underneath everything else too. But I just wanted to kind of build this up as, I don't know, labor of love. So basically from here, I do my retopology just a little bit different, better save before I do something screwed up. Most people will go ahead and start extruding out edges, and sometimes I do. But sometimes I like to get just the general lay of something, and so I'll just take something like this and just go ahead and draw where I would like to have that. And I'm not really sure what happened to that segment, but maybe it just goes underneath that fold a little bit. And then if we can, um, as long as you have the F2 plug-in, you can just, when it wants to work, it works well. Um, when it doesn't, then we get these problems here. And sometimes it has to deal with what surface you're pointing to and what angle that you're viewing this stuff from. And then what I do is I adjust it depending on where I think the flow of this particular object is going, and this would probably go down here, so we'll just keep going like this. So when we get to this point, that's all we're doing is we're just adding things together. And I know that many of you have probably seen plenty of retopology videos that show just this type of process. And there are many tools that you can use. I don't think Retopology is working yet for this, but to tell you the truth, with using Retopology, all I ended up doing was doing the large areas and sometimes the areas that are more like a cylindrical type thing, and it's really easy to cut through the object and just let it automatically generate your cuts. But then I find out that I'm always going back to Blender's native tools, and the native tools here is just going ahead and turning this on, this little snap during transform, and I'm snapping it to the faces, because there are so many of them, it's so dense. I don't want to go with the vertices at all. I can project onto self, that's not all that important, but whatever, I still have it on. But this is the important thing, is project individual elements, and basically what that does is it projects these individual elements, like the vertices, onto another object, and that's how it's able to follow the contours. I found that Retopology really was kind of crashy. And it's crashy to the point where last time I used Retopology, I believe it was on Windows, it had a problem completely locking Blender up, like turning the screen black, and then not being able to recover, and then following their instructions to kind of like escape out of it and then restart it. Didn't really work to fix it, and so I found myself just coming into Blender to use the native tools, because as you can see, they're rock solid as far as putting things down. It may not be as efficient, but at least I haven't had any problems with it crashing. You will have problems on certain areas, and this goes with every retopology tool, especially when you're in areas where the geometry of the target geometry is really thin. So maybe like right up here, it'll select through and may not see the surface that you're trying to get to. This surface over here gets selected, and then things get kind of jacked up and unwieldy. But I think this is pretty good for a good patch. So if I hid the target, it doesn't look like much right now. It just looks like a whole bunch of floating elements that aren't quite connected together, and then we eventually get to this part here. I don't start messing around with subdivision surfacing or looking at the surface as being subdivided quite yet at this stage. Sometimes I do. It's not a hard rule of mine, but I like to see where the flow is, and it separates it out from the rest, from the target object a little bit, and it makes the calculation a little bit easier for the system. because it's not having to constantly reevaluate the subdivisions and going on stuff like that. That's just my personal preference. Doesn't mean anything really. So the one advantage that I like using uh, this method for, using Blender instead of, say, like I said before, 3D code, is because I do have several different types of patching tools and abilities to really extrude these things out any way possible. Um, and it allows me to fix things a little bit faster because there are certain tools that are specifically built for that in here, which 3D code really doesn't have to worry about. So you have to be clear out here somewhere maybe to tell it that this is where I want you to go. So you select this, you hit F. Hopefully it goes and draws that face in the right area. And then we just repeat that process. And I usually do sweeping generalizations too. Come on. Across the entire uh, geometry. Hold on. Thinking. Processing. So we have to figure out how to connect these meshes together, especially when I have such a wide berth here and I'm coming across 3. That'll come in time. It's just that I need to get to a point where I'm happy with the general outlook of things, and that's why, and that's another advantage of using Blender over some other tools, because it allows me to do that. If you have a tool that allows you to do um, changes, um, especially like a polygonal modeler, it's really good at helping you figure those things out. Now I'm wondering if I shouldn't abridge this here, because I'm coming across a difficult area here to get that all connected. So, should I bridge it here and then go through? Those are all the little things that I can think about. As I go, or I can come over here, connect something off of here maybe. Let's do this. I don't know why I did that. Now I could use, come on, a little tool up here. I don't know how well that's going to work. Auto merge editing. So when I bring this here, it should connect there. I don't know if that worked at all or not, but it's hidden up here so that when you get close enough, you can merge things together as one piece. So that works pretty good there too. And now I have 3, but that might be an advantage of going up here too. Maybe I'll just put a reminder that this is kind of what I want to do over here, and then follow that topology there, and then that could probably run up to here and maybe connect there. So I'm giving myself a path to follow, and then possibly connecting in these areas. But it all depends. I think this topology goes here and this one comes down here. So And there's always questions about good topology, and good topology is something that'll give you um, a good polygon flow for the subdivision surfacing, and also for when you go into UV mapping certain things. So then when we turn that off, we're getting things joined together. This is, like I said, this is going to be a little mess down here, so I just have to figure out a solution. And that's most of the time what you're doing is figuring out a solution to your problems that you've actually created. It's not bad to have a triangle, and I think that there might be a triangle in this area in my future. Um, but then we have to deal with these extra vertices, um, so well, no, let's just try this. Let's see how well this behaves. Yeah. And whenever it draws in that polygon using the F2 plugin, or it draws that face, it's going to have the last um, vertex. So I selected this vertex and I told it to draw something out here. This one's always going to be selected last, so if you hadn't noticed that yet, that's what's going on. And then what? Well, I can't use that shortcut because I kept on pausing my recording and starting it up again. So there's going to be a little hiccup. Um, yeah, I can't use that to do stuff because my shortcuts are actually affecting my screen recorder. So maybe I can. Probably can't do that. Oh, geez, come on now. Well, what I want to do here is just do that so it'll work. I kept on trying to hit Control R so I could do a loop cut through there, and Control R was pausing my recording and then restarting it. So that won't work. It's like, why isn't anything working? Whoops. On long runs that aren't loops, the other thing that you can do is, like, if you have a certain amount of topology that goes through here, and you just created it, or you made a loop cut through here and you want it to snap to the surface, it will work on this. Okay, so if I were to just hit grab, then it like snaps everything down. If you have a loop, usually what I found, that loops that go around the whole object, if you try to do that, it doesn't snap down to where you would like it to very well. And so that's just kind of one of those things that you have to be aware of, that I'll just say longitudinally, if it doesn't create a loop around the entire thing, and you just want to do this line of stuff, or maybe a long line of stuff, even if you did something like that, um, you can just hit grab and it'll snap down really easy. It'll put everything down where you want it. But if you don't do that, if you have that around the loop, then it's the circular types of things, the loops just don't work very well. So we might be in another area here where we could create a triangle. So I think that, I know there's a lot of people that are out there that are going, oh my God, you're going to start creating like triangles and stuff like that, and it's going to destroy stuff. It's not. It's just sometimes they're unavoidable, and as you can see, this kind of ends in a triangle anyway. So to have any other shape there to define it would be kind of ridiculous. And so that's what I'm going to end up doing is just probably start these areas again with triangles and then work my way out and try to find a way to put a quad in there. Like maybe it'll start out as a triangle and then I'll do a cut, which turns it into a quad. So for example, if I do this and I do it at the last point here, and let's just say we take this point here and I go put a face there, but I select this part and I go ahead and subdivide it, and then what I have is is a quad. So we're right back to quads again. So that's one way that you can fix it. So I think maybe if I do this and then I go ahead and take these two parts and I do a face here, do this, subdivide that, then you can see I have a point here. And the great thing about what I just did there is that I had quads there too. So everything ended up in a quad. So that turned out really, really good. And so it's just going to be a continual process just like this. I don't think I would bore anyone with doing this for a very, very long time and showing you the entire process. If anyone was interested in it, and watching the train wreck, which is usually Retopology for me, then let me know. But until then, I think what's going to happen is that I'm going to just keep on going like this, and then most of the other part of the videos would be just watching me screw up, and then trying to work my way through it, critically think about how I'm going to do stuff to fix it. Because I don't think it's all that beneficial to always show somebody that you're going to do something the correct way every single time, because it doesn't happen that way. And there's a lot of people that make the tutorials or videos and stuff like that they do flow a lot better because they practice it over and over again, or what they're going to do over and over again. And what people don't see, what they miss out on, is how many times they've actually screwed something up and how they had to fix it, and then they've practiced over and over again how to fix it. And so all you see is the perfect way all the time. I don't think that's beneficial to people, because we learn through making mistakes and making errors and stuff. And so you're going to make mistakes all the time. You're going to make errors all the time. You may even have to start something over completely. I've gone to a point where I've modeled something and it just didn't end up where I wanted it to go. And because it didn't end up where I wanted it to go, I scrapped the whole thing and started over again. And I think that's just a normal thing to do. So here we go with a little bit of what we got going on here. So this would be the retopology part of it, and then or the subdivided part of it, and then with the smooth surfaces. And it looks like we have enough polyflow to define some of these surfaces being smooth, and it follows the surface pretty well. And then what I usually do, after a while, what I end up doing anyway after a while is taking this subdivided surface and then going ahead and telling it to do a shrink wrap modifier so it follows a little bit closer to the geometry that I'm building on top of. That's just one of those things that I end up always using, is that it's good to use the native tools to snap all this stuff down to where you need it to go. but I also use the modifiers, as modeling tools, and you really should, because they're really good at it, right? I'm not really sure if I have enough resolution there to justify what I just did, so we're gonna leave it the way it is for now. Um, like I said, broad, sweeping, general flow at first, and then add your details in later. So this is completely fine. This is something that I can deal with, and when everything gets all connected together, I think you'll see that it's just it's just kind of a neat setup and a neat workflow, and hopefully it allows me to um, really get in and UV this really well. The other thing is that at the end of all this, when I get to the point of closing these things off, and I'll just show you that really quick, usually I just do a really quick inset on this so that it defines an edge and makes it sharper. Okay, so um, I do that around all those things, especially if there's a sharp termination, and then I do an edge loop around the objects too to sharpen those areas up so that it looks um, not so blobby and rounded. And then it also allows me an extra, by doing an edge loop around here and then doing an inset within here, it allows me this ring here to go ahead and cut out or whatever I want to do for the UV workflow. So it helps to do that, to just kind of put in those additional loops to shore up the edges and stuff like that. I know there's a lot of people that like to use edge creasing. Edge creasing is great. Edge creasing does not translate into anything else or any other type of uh, software. I don't think that there's a file format that allows edge creasing information to be transferred to another place. I don't think, or into another piece of software. Edge loops, however, are geometry, and so they do translate over really well. So I would probably use the edge loop approach. And the edge loop approach is probably not going to work right around here. There's going to have to be something else that I have to do around here, because I just terminated that there. So that's going to kind of bite me in the butt. But as I come in and I get these drawn down here, and then, everything kind of has that same flow where it just cascades into one another. Um, I'm pretty sure that a process similar to this is going to happen for each one of those little sections. And then by the time we get around to the other side, this isn't a simple shape where I can just go ahead and use a solidify modifier and push everything through to the other side. I'm going to have to basically take the edge loops and just continue them around the edges of wherever they terminate. So this is going to go around the edges, that's probably going to go around the edges, even though I don't like that flow so much. I don't like this coming down here too much, but that's going to be something that we'll have to work on when we get there. So anyway, a little bit of how I go about doing a complex surface like this. Probably won't go to completion on a video. I'm already up to 520 megabytes on this. I know it's not much for for a couple of terabyte hard drives and stuff like that, but I think you get the gist of what's going on here. All right, we'll talk to you guys later.